Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year, happy 2023. I am so excited. This is one of my favorite videos to film every single year. This is actually the first video I ever filmed for my channel 2 years ago, my yearly wrap up. And I can't believe it. This is like the 2-year anniversary of me having a YouTube channel. That is awesome. I am so excited. And I am just so stoked to be able to do this video today. As you can tell by the title, this is going to be my top 10 books of 2022. 2022 was a rough year for me for reading. These are like the vast majority of my 5-star reads will be spoken about. This year I got through 66 books. I think it was 18,339 pages, which was not my goal. I did want to read 72 because last year I did 71 and the year before that I did 56. So I'm pretty happy with 66. It's a nice happy medium. But I had a lot of things going on this year. So the fact that I was still able to get through 66 made me very, very, very excited. I had a lot of goals that I set for myself at the beginning of this year. I know I wanted to read like a door stopper, did not do that. I know I wanted to read at least, I think it was 3 or 4 classic novels. I started Persuasion by Jane Austen, got like a third of the way through it and then got sidetracked. So that didn't happen. And then I wanted to read a bunch of nonfiction. I actually read a ton of nonfiction this year. A lot of haunted histories. Nonfiction tends to be a little tricky for me to read. It's definitely more on the more difficult side for me because it's not like a story, so I really have to be in the mood for it. I know I wanted to read a couple short story collections. I think I read one. I read If It Bleeds by Stephen King, and that actually may have been the only one I read. So I didn't meet any of my reading goals apart from the nonfiction, but that's okay. I'm still really, really proud of getting through 66 books. Before I started my channel, and like really made reading, which is one of my favorite hobbies, like a primary focus and an aspect of self-care. It was really hard for me to ever get through like 10 books a year. And the fact that I have now for 3 years in a row read over 50 books is incredible to me, because I remember when I first got Goodreads and I saw people with reading goals of over 20, 30, 40, I was like, I will never be able to do that. And now I've done it 3 years in a row and I'm just so proud of that. So before I get into my top 10, and this is going to be a weird top 10 because they're not all 5-star reads, and there are definitely certain that I didn't think were going to be as ranked as high as they were. I want to talk about some honorable mentions. So the first two I want to talk about are Counterfeit by Kristen Chen and The Knockoff by Lucy Sykes and Joe Piazza. Those are my 2 palate cleanser books of the year. I started reading some really heavy books this year that put me in like a reading slump, and they were very depressing, and I just needed something that was fun and lighthearted. So I picked those 2, which are like fashion industry books, and I devoured them. They were both 5-star reads for me, but they are not horror, and this is primarily a horror channel, and my reading is usually focused on that. So they were 2 honorable mentions that I absolutely loved and adored, and they were very high up on my list, but I didn't want to put them in this wrap up because they are not horror. But yes, The Knockoff and Counterfeit were both fantastic. If you're into the fashion world, like definitely check those books out. And then I played around with other books that I was like really, really thrilled with that almost made it onto my list a couple times, but I took them off. I had Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak, which I really liked. That was a 5-star read for me, but looking back on it, I think I just enjoyed the story overall, like the journey of figuring out the mystery. I think looking back on it, it actually wasn't that much of a, it wasn't really that well written of a book, but I just kind of got caught up in like the story and had to finish it. So I read like 200 pages in one day, and it was fun. I enjoyed reading it. I had a lot of fun with that book, but I just couldn't put it on my top 10 list because just looking back on it, I don't think it's gonna stand the test of time the way some of these other books will. I also had Catriona Ward's Sundial. That was, I think, my first 5-star read of the year, if I remember correctly. The problem with that is, looking back on it, I know I really enjoyed reading it, but I really don't remember much of what happened in that book. I read it so quickly, and just nothing really stuck with me the way that The Last House on Needless Street did, which I believe was a 4-star read for me last year. But I remember the vast majority of what happened in The Last House on Needless Street, and I'm really struggling to remember what happened in Sundial, apart from like the general plot. So I couldn't put that on my list either, even though that was a 5-star read. I also had on that list Last Days by Adam Neville. That was a 4-star read for me. I did really enjoy it. It had some really, really scary scenes. Adam Neville is one of those writers where I either really love his work or I really don't vibe with it. I never really dislike his work, but it's just not my type of writing sometimes. And Last Days was a nice combination of kind of both. But it did start out really, really strong, and I do think I And I do think I prefer Adam Neville's older work to some of his newer stuff. I think I read 3 Adam Neville books this year. Last Days, The Vessel, and Cunning Folk, and Last Days was definitely the best. But yeah, so those are my honorable mentions. But now let's get into my top 10. And just so you guys know, I base my top 10 not based on ratings. Every book in my top 10 will be either a 5 or 4-star rating, but sometimes I will have 4-star ratings that are higher than 5-star ratings because over the last year, those are books that stuck with me more. And I will obviously get into all of those as I dive through them. But let's start with book number 10. And that is The Burning Girls by C.J. Tudor, who you guys may know as the author of The Chalk Man. Now, I know C.J. Tudor is a little bit of a controversial author. I know that she has written some kind of questionable scenes, primarily in The Chalk Man. I actually do quite enjoy her novel, and this one really stuck with me. I actually forgotten about this book until I was going back and looking at books that I had read this year. This was a 5-star read for me, and I realized that there were a lot of scenes and twists in this book that have actually stuck with me throughout the whole year. That I kept coming back to the big twist in this book and how it really caught me off guard, and I really loved the setting of this. I'll read the inside flap for you guys really quickly. So it says, "A dark history lingers in Chapelcroft. 500 years ago, Protestant martyrs were betrayed, then burned. 30 years ago, 2 teenage girls disappeared without a trace. And a few weeks ago, the vicar of the local parish hanged himself in the nave of the church. Reverend Jack Brooks, a single parent with a 14-year-old daughter and a heavy conscience, arrives in the village hoping for a fresh start. Instead, Jack finds a town rife with conspiracies and secrets, and is greeted with a strange welcome package, an exorcism kit and a note that warns, but there is nothing covered up that will not be revealed, and hidden that will not be known. The more Jack and daughter Flo explore the town and get to know its strange denizens, the deeper they are drawn into the age-old rifts, mysteries, and suspicions. And when Flo begins to see specters of girls ablaze, it becomes apparent there are ghosts here that refuse to be laid to rest. Uncovering the truth can be deadly in a village with a bloody past, where everyone has something to hide and no one trusts an outsider." I don't think I'm going to read too many of the backs of these books for this. I just want to make sure that the books that have really big twists, I do, because I promised you the premise I was about to tell you all would have actually been a spoiler for this book, and I just realized that after reading the inside flap. But I really, really, really enjoyed this. I really loved the twist in this. I loved the small town. I loved that this was like a murder mystery, but it was also like sort of a ghost story, but not in the way that like there was a supernatural element that really pushed the plot forward. You were able to solve what happened with or without the supernatural elements being present, and I just thought this was really, really fun. I loved the characters. I loved the setting. The twist really got me. There were 2 that were like kind of like, oh wow, okay. And I had a lot of fun with this, so I really did enjoy this. I'm so happy I read it. I really love this cover. It's just really striking. So yes, loved that 5-star read. Okay, next up is Tana French's The Searcher. I just spoke about this a little more in depth on my December wrap up, so I won't talk about this too much, but this was my favorite slow burn of the year. This was another 5-star read from me. This is the story. This is another murder mystery. This is not supernatural at all. And it is the story of a detective who has retired in Ireland and is told by a local child that their brother has gone missing, and the child pretty much convinces this retired detective to take on the case. This is very atmospheric, it's very slow, it's very laid back. There are these elements of just coziness in the tone of this book, and yet the topics are very heavy and dark. This kind of feels like a slow-paced SVU episode. It is just very relaxing to read this book, oddly, even though it's like a crime thriller. Thriller is definitely not the word for this book because it's not really thrilling, but it is mysterious as well as quaint. And I said this in my last video about this. It reminds me a lot of a non-comical version of Hot Fuzz. Small town, something's not right in the small town, like just an outsider comes in, except instead of doing like the cliche everybody ostracizes the new guy from like America, they kind of welcome him, and it was a very different tone than the normal cliches I would see in like secretive small town novels or stories. And I really enjoy that. I really do think I liked Hannah French's writing, but you have to be very prepared for her slow burn. She really likes to set a scene. What could be told in one page, she probably does in 2 or 3, but the writing is so eloquent and engaging that you don't really mind. It's definitely a book that you have to slow down to read. But I really appreciated the pacing in this book, and I really appreciated the unraveling of this book. And I usually wouldn't want something this wordy, but for some reason this just really worked for me, and I was really stoked on that. All right, book number 8. Okay, so this was a 4-star read for me, and I kept putting it on this list and then taking it off this list and putting it on this list, and then I was just like, I have to have this on this list because I really loved the imagery in this book. And to be perfectly honest, the reason this book is 4 stars is because I wanted it to be a full-length novel and not a novella, and that is Below by Laurel Hightower. I'm pretty certain that I learned about this book from Tim Meyer's Instagram page. He had posted about reading this. I'd never heard of Laurel Hightower before, but look, it's Mothman, and I freaking love Mothman. I love Mothman. There's always a Mothman in reach in my house. And I really enjoyed this. So this is the book about a woman driving through West Virginia. She has car troubles, and then runs into some mysterious folks and several cryptids. And I want to keep it at that. Mothman was really interesting in this. I wish there was more Mothman in it. There is a nice amount of Mothman in it, but there is also focus on other cryptids as well, and I wasn't expecting that, but I really liked it, and the imagery and the suspense and the anxiety that this book created in, what is it, like 100 pages? 106 pages. It just blew my mind. I was so engrossed in this and the mystery of it, and I absolutely loved it. I have so many questions that went unanswered by this, but I loved Laurel Hightower's tone, and I just had so much fun with this book, and it's one of those books that I've just thought about all throughout the year since I've read it. And I'm so happy that we got a Mothman book. I love Mothman. He was present. He was cool. I loved the way they portrayed him, where he kind of is this is he good, is he evil kind of character that we have in folklore today or cryptozoology today. And he's represented that way in this novella, and I adored it. So this was awesome, and I had so much fun with this. Okay, book number 7. I'm so stoked on this book. So this is Stargazers by L.P. Hernandez. This, I believe, was a Nightworms exclusive. It's part of the My Dark Library series that Mother Horror, who is the founder of Nightworms, does. And I believe this is L.P. Hernandez's first, like, novella. He's done short stories before, but I loved this. This is a really interesting kind of end of the world, almost sci-fi horror story. I don't want to give too much away, but I absolutely loved this. This is the story of a strange, unexplained kind of like maybe cosmic horror phenomenon, but it really worked for me. It was so mysterious and over the top, and I haven't really seen anything like it before, and I really loved the focus on our main character and his fight to save his family. And I was so blown away by this, and when I get something like this, like if it's short, I usually read it immediately, even if it's like an author I've never really heard of before, and I was blown away to just be so impressed with this debut novella. I really want to read more from L.P. Hernandez. The fact that he was able to do something in like 116 pages that just like stayed with me all year and really impressed me and was a really unique way to do an end of the world story. I was just thrilled with this. If you have not read this, I think you can get this. I think Dark Matter might sell this still. I'm pretty sure the My Dark libraries are available for purchase still. I don't think this was like just a Nightworms thing. I might be wrong. I don't know. But I really loved this. This was so cool. I think I looked on Goodreads, and this was like the highest rated book that I read overall by like Goodreads readers this year. I think it has a 4.44 average on Goodreads right now, which is awesome, and it totally deserves this. It's so unique. I love post-apocalyptic stories where they really focus on humanity, more so than anything else, but the cosmic weirdness of this story adds so much to it as well, and it's just beautifully written, uniquely crafted, and I had so much fun with kind of like a cliche topic done in a new light. And I actually have another book that's similar to that, but I'll talk about that later. I knew I was going to have a Darcy Coates book on here. I read so much Darcy Coates this year. I read all 3 of her new releases and The Fallcroft Ghost, and this one was my favorite. I will read the back of this book really quickly. So it says, when their mother is hospitalized, Tara and Kyle are sent to stay with their only remaining relatives. Their elderly grandparents seem friendly at first, and the rambling house is full of fun nooks and crannies to explore. But strange things keep happening. A bedroom remains locked at all times. Doors slam and curtains shift when no one is inside. And there are whispers of a sister who drowned in the lake long ago. Something is being hidden away, kept safely out of sight, and the children can't shake the feeling that it's watching them. When a violent storm cuts off their only contact with the outside world, Tara and Kyle must find a way to protect themselves from their increasingly erratic grandparents and from the ghosts that haunt the Fallcross house. But can they ever hope to escape the unforgivable secret that has ensnared their family for generations? I was stoked on this. I don't really see this book spoken about a lot in like the Darcy Coates fan community. And I just kind of read it because it's really highly rated on Goodreads. And to be honest, I haven't read a book that has children as protagonists in a Darcy Coates novel. And I believe they're teenagers, like 13 and like 15 or something like that. But they're very well written, very likable kids, very smart kids. And it actually reminded me a lot of that movie, The Visit. The ending's different, like the plot is different, but it's similar in tone and concept. And I just thoroughly devoured this book. I read this book so quickly, and it was one of the best things I've read from Darcy Coates thus far. Again, I read 4 Darcy Coates books this year. I really enjoyed all of them except for Gallows Hill. But it's so fun to see Darcy Coates do a haunted house story, which is what she is known for, and her cute, cozy horror, but in a different light. I really liked, again, the young characters and the unraveling of this mystery before them. It wasn't just a typical haunted house story, the way that we get from a lot of Darcy Coates stuff. And I just really thoroughly enjoyed this, and I don't think this book is talked about enough from her bibliography, and I think everybody who is a fan of Darcy Coates should read this one. This was just absolutely fantastic. And that was a 5-star read, as was Stargazers. I don't remember if I said that, but this the reason I point that out is because my next one was a 4-star read, and yet it is number 4 on my list. Number 5, I mean. Yeah. Number 5 on my list. So this is The Mist by Stephen King. Super famous. I have yet to see the movie. I know I need to because I know it's supposed to be amazing and the ending is supposed to be better than the book, and even Stephen King agrees from that. I probably don't need to tell you guys what the story is about. It's so freaking famous, but I had never read it before. But a weird, mysterious mist overtakes a small town in Maine, and there are things in the mist, and there are a bunch of people who get trapped in a grocery store and are trying to survive the night, pretty much. I love this. This is as great as everybody says. The reason this is a 4-star read for me is because Stephen King is my favorite author. I hold his work in such high regard. What would normally be a 5-star read, which this, had it not been written by Stephen King, probably would have been a 5-star read. But because I know Stephen King has written even better books, this ended up being a 4-star read. You know, it's not Misery, it's not Salem's Lot, but it is frickin' fantastic. I really enjoyed this. There were a couple character flaws in this from our main character that I wasn't thrilled about, but this is scary, that is suspenseful, it is so worth the read. And it's technically considered a short story, but this copy is 230 pages, which I guess is a Stephen King short story since he's so wordy. But this was brilliant, and I devoured it in like 2 days, and the setting was amazing. The opening scenes were just so good. And I really do, I know the ending of the film, and I do kind of agree, and I think this might have also contributed to the 4-star, that I think the ending of the film is definitely way more devastating than the ending of this, which is definitely far more hopeful. So I'm kind of happy that that's the canon. I feel like a lot of times, especially with like It, the ending of the films just tend to be more hopeful than the endings of the books. So it's funny to see the reverse on this time. But this was fantastic. I adored this. And I only read 2 Stephen King books this year. I think I read The Mist and I read If It Bleeds. And this one just, I'm so happy. Old school Stephen King is always just so top notch. So 4-star read. In the grand scheme of things, it would probably be a 5-star read, but it's Stephen King, and I rate him against himself, not other books. So 4 stars for him. Okay, this is a surprising one. This is definitely a surprising one. So book number 4, 5-star read. This is The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling, and this is a romantic, whimsical, witchy book. That's the best way to say it. This is the sequel to The Ex-Hex, which I read earlier this year. And I really wish I had read it last year when I first got it in my Unplugged book box, because it's very Halloween-centric, and it was so fun and cute and charming, and it was such a great palate cleanser book, and it's so witchy, and it's set in this small town in Georgia that is like Salem, but in Georgia, run by these like powerful witch families, and it is like reading like Charmed. Or like, oh, yeah, it's like reading Charmed, the show from like the 90s. And I adored it. And I was really excited about The Kiss Curse because the main character in the X-Hex's cousin, who was one of my favorite characters in the X-Hex, is the star of this one. And this one is so much stronger and so much funnier and so much more engaging. And it's just this campy, funny, over-the-top, super witchy, almost Halloween towny, but for adults. Like rom-com. And I'm putting it on this list because it is witchy. There are ghosts, there are supernatural elements. But this is just so fun. The series is so fun. I really hope there's a third. I usually don't like series. But these books are just so quaint and charming and adorable. And I just loved this book. Oh my god. I love Gwen's cat. There's a talking cat. Like, it's so fun. Or like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the show from the 2000s with Melissa Joan Hart. Very much those kind of vibes. And I really needed that this year. And it was just, so good. Loved this. 5 stars. Alright, next up. This was one of my most anticipated reads of the year. This is Black Mouth by Ronald Malfi, coming in spot number 3. This almost made it to my number 2 spot, and I'll explain why I did it in just a moment. But 5-star read, absolutely adored this. I do adore my Ronald Malfi. This is another coming-of-age horror story. Ronald Malfi, obviously, if you've been on my channel before, wrote December Park, which is one of my favorite coming-of-age stories of all time. However, that is a coming-of-age story that focuses on teenagers engaging in a mystery that is rooted in reality. This one is far more rooted in the supernatural. So I've always kind of compared December Park to It. In reality, I think this is more akin to It. There are some supernatural cosmic elements in this. And just like It, and unlike December Park, this book does not just focus on these teenagers. I believe they're actually like 12 or 11 in this book. It doesn't focus on just their younger years. You do get flashbacks and flash forwards of their adult years. In fact, the story is told primarily through their adult years with flashbacks to their childhood, and I thought it worked really, really, really well. And I was kind of stunned by that because with coming of age stories, I tend to usually focus primarily on like the actual stories of the youth. And even with It, I prefer so much more reading about the kids than I do about their adult selves. But with this book, was actually really, really well balanced. I really liked the adult characters in this. I loved seeing the back and forth between them as children and them as adults. I loved how everything came back together. I loved the villain in this. He was so creepy and so cool. Like, I would love to see this on film. He's like this creepy backyard magician, and it's awesome, and I really, really loved this. The ending was a little strange for me, and it did bank a little heavily on the mystery of cosmic horror, and you guys know me and cosmic horror, we don't really mesh too well together, but for the most part, I really thoroughly enjoyed this. I loved the 4 friends. I thought they were so strong and so well written and just so believable, and I love flawed, likable characters. I've said that a lot recently, and this is a book filled with flawed, likable characters. And I devoured this. I was so blown away with this. I mean, I went into this book knowing I was going to like it because I genuinely, generally love Ronald Malfi's work, but I was really, really impressed with this, and this was going to be my number 2 book. However, the last book that I read of the year actually stole that spot last minute, and it was also by Ronald Malfi. I loved this. This is The Night Parade. This is my number 2 book of the year. This is another kind of post-apocalyptic book. It is, again, the story of a man trying to keep his family safe at the beginning of the end of the world. I just spoke about this at length in my December wrap-up video. I went into this book completely blind. I just knew that it was a well-liked Ronald Malfi book, and lo and behold, I now believe it is the best book that I've ever read from Ronald Malfi. Immediate 5 stars. I knew before I got to the ending it was going to be a 5-star read for me because I just enjoyed it so much. And then I got to the ending, and it was one of the most perfect endings I've ever read in any novel ever. 100% the best thing I've ever read from Ronald Malfi as an ending. And it just blew me away. Just like Stargazers, but in a very different way. This is a very, very unique way to do a post-apocalyptic novel. This was written in 2016, but it actually predicts a lot of the things that happened during COVID, a lot of the non-believers, a lot of the conspiracy theorists, and to me, the most interesting thing about this book was we just witnessed with COVID when there is a huge epidemic that a lot of times people just want the world to continue as they know it. And that is a huge factor in this book. And now that I've lived it, it's insane to me to see how rooted in reality that mindset is. And I feel like had I read this before COVID, I don't think I would have bought this concept that everybody just kind of went on with their lives as if everything was fine, even as people are just perishing left and right from this unknown disease. And this book focuses so heavily on that aspect, and it really drives the plot so forward, and there's this huge element of the distrust between the regular person and the CDC, and I just really, really loved and devoured this. I don't want to say too much about it because I do think this is a book that is great to go into blind, but it blew me away. It was a 5-star read. It almost became my top read of the year, but it wasn't, and I'm gonna really dive deep into my top read of the year because I am stunned it's my top read of the year, even though I'm pretty sure the second I finished it, in my heart of hearts, I knew it was gonna be the top read of the year. But yeah, also I have this beautiful edition from Cemetery Dance Publications. It's their graveyard editions. It's signed, and just, it's so pretty. But I was blown away by The Night Parade. It's one of the best post-apocalyptic stories I've ever read. It's like Ronald Malfi's The Stand, but way shorter. And not saying much. This is an over 400-page novel, but the Stand is a behemoth. But I adored this, and Ronald Malfi just continues to blow me away, and I was so... Just the characters in this were so realistic and believable and flawed and scared and likable all at the same time. And this was one of the most realistic novels I've ever read. Like, I just believed every single character. Nobody felt like a character. Nobody felt like a plot device for the book. Everybody felt so real. And this was just so massively impressive. Just one of the best, most perfect books I've ever read. Unfortunately for it, though, it did not get my #1 spot. And this might be shocking, but my #1 spot this year is a 4-star read. And it's one of those situations similar to when I read Let the Right One In, where I recognize that the book should be a 5-star read because it's that well written and the story is that compelling. But the subject matter, topics, and certain scenes are so disturbing and deserve so many trigger warnings that I can't, in my heart of heart, give it a 4-star read because there's such a level of true discomfort when reading it that I just couldn't give it a 5-star read. However, this novel, I think I've read it in February, maybe January. I think I read it really early on in the year. It might have been January. This novel has stuck with me for the entirety of the year. I remember every scene in this novel like it is ingrained in my brain, like a home movie playing on repeat. I can't get it out of my head, and it's very rare that I've experienced that with a book before. And that is Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. This is one of the most fucked up books I've ever read. This is one of the most disturbing books I've ever read. I actually found this book because a booktuber literally listed it as the most disturbing book they had ever read. And I had read at the very end of last year, A Cold Place for Dying by Christopher Triana, and I liked his writing style. That book didn't blow me away, but I liked his writing style. And I kept seeing this book talked about, and it's set, I think it's in Alabama. It's 100% Southern setting. And I liked the setting. I thought the concept was interesting. I knew it was a cosmic horror novel, I believe. And so I read it. It's really short. It's really, really short. It's under 200 pages. This is one of the most visually descriptive and stunning books I've ever read. Like, the visuals for the titular Riverman are incredible. This is one of the most messed up books I have ever read. It's one of the only books I've ever read where pretty much at exactly the halfway point, one thing happened and it changed my perspective on the entirety of the novel and the entirety of the characters. And I've never felt that blindsided by a book before, and I have never felt that disgusted by a book before, and I've never felt that intrigued by a book before. Like, I always talk about this on my channel, but the Patrick Hockstetter chapters in it, I think, are the scariest aspects of that story. This twist in the dead center of this book is very similar to the Patrick Hockstetter chapters. It takes a book that is filled with supernatural and disturbing concepts and cliche villains. And I say cliche not because they're written as a cliche, but like a serial killer is a bad guy, right? And it makes you think that there are people who are so much worse than our traditional horror villains. And this book blew me away. I can still see the images in my head that the Riverman journey, the whole book pretty much takes place on a river, that the river journey like brought me to. This book is incredible. It's incredible. And it is so disturbing. And it's like disturbing in a way that is so effective. I truly, truly hate when novels write disturbing, appalling, horrific things simply for shock value. And while the things in this are for shock value, it pushes the narrative and it twists your senses on reality and redefines a character in a way that was just so effective. Like, this is one of the most effective uses of disturbing literature to get points across that I have ever read. It is the whole concept of things are not what they seem. And like, don't worry, the bad guys get their just desserts. Like, this is just brilliant. I don't even want to like summarize what this book is about. It is cosmic horror on a river, and it is so well done, and I can't believe my top read of the year is a cosmic horror novel. Because the horror in this book has nothing to do with the cosmic effects of it. This book is just amazing. There's scenes in the shack. Oh my god, the scenes in the shack are so claustrophobic and well written, and this is just brilliant. It's so brilliant, and this is 100% a 5-star level read. I can't give it 5 stars. It's so messed up. It's so messed up. But like, 100% my top read. I read this book. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I don't know if I could ever read it again, but every single scene is ingrained in my brain, and oh, it's just so messed up, guys. It's so messed up, and it's so good, and it's so appalling all at the same time. And I've just never really had a book that had this kind of effect on me, where I actually don't think I actually liked the content of the book, but the way it was structured and written, and the like big reveal and the twist, and it was just so well done. I have obviously so many mixed feelings on this book, but again, hands down the most effective horror novel I read this year. Christopher Triana is brilliant. I can't wait to read more of his stuff. I think I have to do it in doses though, because this was really the only thing I could read from him this year, but it impressed me so very much. Yeah. So, and I hope he comes out with some more things soon, because this is just amazing. And if you're into some really disturbing horror, oh god, this book is, that is the ticket. Anyway, so thank you guys so much for watching this very long 2022 wrap up. I will be doing my most anticipated reads of 2023 very soon, and I will be doing a most disappointing books of 2023, and I'm going to talk about that and what that means. It's not the worst books of 2023, it's just the books that I wanted to be impressed with and was not. So that'll be up very soon, ideally right after this video is up. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah!